Ladies and gentlemen, there is a quiet revolution taking place within you. It's not loud nor is it visible to the world, but it is powerful. It is the slow, sacred process of healing. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." Healing is the path we walk when we decide, consciously and courageously, that the past no longer defines us. And though the world may not see it, you will feel it. Here are 7 signs you're finally healing, and 5 keynotes to anchor your journey. There comes a moment in your healing when the silence that once terrified you becomes a sanctuary. Where the absence of noise, of constant distraction, is no longer a void you rush to fill, but a space you begin to treasure. In the past, solitude may have felt like punishment, like abandonment. When left alone, your mind became a battleground, your thoughts too loud, your memories too painful. You sought others not out of connection, but out of escape. From yourself, from your wounds, from the parts of your soul you hadn't yet dared to face. But now something has shifted. You sit alone, and the silence no longer screams. It whispers, it comforts, it reflects. You are no longer afraid to be with yourself, because you are beginning to know yourself. Not the mask, not the performance, but the true, unfiltered essence underneath. And what you're discovering is not something to run from, but someone to come home to. Carl Jung believed that loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. Healing dissolves that inner divide. When you no longer need the crowd to feel whole, when you stop performing for love and start resting in your own presence, that's when true healing begins. You stop filling every moment with noise, with screens, with other people's opinions. Instead, you sit by yourself and feel the stillness wrap around you like a warm blanket. You start taking walks without music. You find joy in journaling, meditating, or simply sipping your coffee while watching the sun rise. These quiet rituals, once unthinkable, now feel sacred. And perhaps most importantly, in solitude, you begin to hear the voice of your own soul again. That gentle, intuitive whisper that had long been drowned out by external expectations. You begin to rebuild trust with yourself. You no longer need validation to feel valuable. You no longer need constant companionship to feel complete. You are not lonely, you are rooted. You are learning to enjoy your own company, and in doing so, you are discovering one of the most profound truths of healing, that the person you've been waiting for all along is you. You no longer fear solitude because it is no longer your enemy. It has become your mirror, your medicine, your teacher. There was a time when being triggered felt like being thrown into chaos, an emotional ambush, a storm that seemed to come from nowhere. A word, a tone, a memory, and suddenly, you were overwhelmed. Defensive, angry, hurt. It felt uncontrollable, like something outside of you had taken over. And often you judge yourself for it. You ask, "What's wrong with me? Why am I like this?" And in that shame, you buried your reactions, suppressing them rather than understanding them. But healing, true healing, brings with it a shift in awareness. You start to slow down, you begin to notice. The emotion still arises, your heart still races, your body still tightens. But instead of reacting blindly, you pause, you breathe, you ask questions. And in that moment of curiosity, you take back your power. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious holds the keys to our transformation. What we repress doesn't disappear, it waits. It waits in our triggers, in our projections, in the moments when life unsettles us and demands that we pay attention. When you're healing, you begin to understand that a trigger is not your enemy. It's a signpost. It's your inner child knocking on the door, asking to be seen. It's your wounded self holding up a mirror, saying, "This still hurts. Please don't ignore me." Instead of pushing those feelings away, you lean in. You trace the discomfort back to its root. You remember the first time you felt that fear, that rejection, that shame. You realize your reaction today isn't just about what's happening now. It's a replay of something much older, much deeper. And with that realization, something remarkable happens. The trigger becomes a teacher. It teaches you about the stories you've carried, often unconsciously. The belief that you're not good enough, the fear of being abandoned, the shame of not being perfect. But now you see them not as truths, but as wounds. And wounds can be healed. With time, your triggers guide you toward your most important inner work. They become opportunities for growth. They show you where you are still tender, still vulnerable, but also where you are ready to evolve. What once made you spiral now makes you reflect. What once controlled you now teaches you how to reclaim your narrative. You begin to thank your triggers. Not because they're pleasant, but because they're honest. Because they reveal what needs attention. Because they lead you toward integration. Jung reminded us that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And this is exactly what you're doing when you let your triggers speak instead of silencing them. So now, when you feel that familiar flare of emotion, you don't run. You listen. You learn. You show up for yourself in ways you never could before. And that, right there, is one of the clearest signs you are healing. There is a profound turning point in your healing journey when you start setting boundaries. And, for the first time, you do so without guilt, not from anger, not from fear, but from self-respect. You no longer explain, over-apologize, or shrink just to make others comfortable. You no longer confuse being kind with being compliant. You begin to understand deeply that protecting your peace is not a betrayal of others, it's an act of devotion to yourself. In the past, saying no may have felt dangerous. You feared rejection, disapproval, or the loss of love. Maybe you learned early on that love had to be earned, that your worth was tied to how much you gave, how much you tolerated, how small you made yourself for others. You believed that being good meant being available at all costs. You abandoned yourself in the name of being accepted. But healing reveals a truth that you can no longer unseize. Love that demands your silence, your exhaustion, or your self-betrayal is not love. It's control. And when you realize this, everything begins to shift. You stop overextending yourself. You stop making excuses for other people's disrespect. You stop abandoning your own needs just to keep the peace. Instead, you start drawing lines. Not to keep people out, but to keep your soul intact. You say, I can't take that call right now. Or, I won't discuss this further. Or, this doesn't work for me. And you say it calmly, firmly, and without needing to explain your worth. You no longer feel the need to justify your limits to those who benefit from your lack of them. Carl Jung spoke often about individuation, the process of becoming your true self. This process cannot happen while you're constantly molding yourself to meet the expectations of others. To become whole, you must reclaim what you once gave away too easily. Your time, your energy, your voice. And that means learning the sacred art of boundary setting. At first, it's uncomfortable. The guilt creeps in. You may even fear that people will leave. And truthfully, some might. But healing teaches you something even more powerful. Those who truly love you will respect your boundaries, not resent them. And those who don't, they were only ever attached to your compliance, not your truth. There comes a point in your healing journey when you no longer cling so tightly to people, to outcomes, to identities that once defined you. Where once you held on out of fear, now you begin to let go out of wisdom. You start to understand in your bones that everything is impermanent. Not as a bitter truth, but as a sacred one. Not as a reason to despair, but as a reason to live more deeply, more presently, more fully. You begin to see that loss is not punishment. Change is not betrayal. Life does not owe you permanence. It offers you presence. The people you once thought you could never live without may drift away. The dreams you built your identity around may dissolve. The feelings you thought would last forever fade into memory. And yet you survive. You evolve. You begin again. Carl Jung taught that transformation comes through embracing the cycles of life, not resisting them. The psyche, like nature, moves through seasons. There are moments of blooming, moments of decay, moments of death, and moments of rebirth. And when you are healing, you stop trying to keep everything in perpetual summer. You stop forcing things to stay that were only ever meant to pass through. You grieve, yes. You feel the ache of letting go. But you no longer fight reality with clenched fists. You open your hands. You say goodbye with grace. You allow what is meant to leave, and trust that what is meant for you will arrive in its own time. This acceptance doesn't make you passive, it makes you peaceful. You begin to live with less attachment but with more love. You cherish people for who they are, not for how long they stay. You value moments for what they are, not for what they promise. You look at beauty and know it is fleeting, and that makes it more sacred, not less. You also begin to let go of your old selves, the versions of you that once served a purpose but are no longer needed. You stop clinging to old stories, outdated roles, and the comfort of familiarity. You allow yourself to change, to grow, to unbecome who you were so you can become who you're meant to be. Healing teaches you that impermanence is not a flaw in the design. It is the design. And when you embrace it, you unlock a new kind of freedom. You are no longer paralyzed by the fear of loss, because you understand that everything you truly need is already within you. You are no longer held hostage by the illusion of control, because you trust the ebb and flow of life. And so you breathe easier, you love deeper, you surrender more often, you stop resisting what is and begin dancing with it. You find beauty in the fragile, the fleeting, the unfinished. You no longer seek to possess, you seek to experience. This is not resignation, it is transcendence. It is the wisdom of the soul that knows nothing lasts, and that is what makes it all so precious. To embrace impermanence is to walk with grace through the ever-changing landscape of life. And when you can do that, not with bitterness, but with open-hearted wonder, that is when you know you are healing. There is a moment in your healing when the weight you've carried for years suddenly feels too heavy to hold. And instead of tightening your grip, you begin to let go. Not because what happened was okay, not because the pain wasn't real, but because you finally understand that holding on to resentment is not protecting you, it's imprisoning you. And so, quietly, courageously, you begin the process of forgiveness. But this time it's different. You are not forgiving to erase what happened. You are not rewriting history or pretending it didn't matter. You are not minimizing your suffering or absolving someone of their responsibility. You are forgiving for one reason: to set yourself free. In the past, forgiveness may have felt impossible. How could you forgive someone who never apologized? How could you let go of what shaped you, scarred you, changed the trajectory of your life? And the truth is, you couldn't. Not until you were ready. Not until the desire for peace outweighed the desire to be right, to be vindicated, to be avenged. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." And in the act of forgiveness you make a choice. A radical, soul-defining choice. You choose to no longer let the pain define your identity. You choose to no longer carry the bitterness that corrodes your joy. You choose to reclaim the energy you've poured into resentment and redirect it toward healing. This kind of forgiveness doesn't happen overnight. It's not a moment, it's a process. Some days it feels like liberation. Other days, it feels like loss. You may grieve not only what was done to you, but the parts of yourself you abandoned to survive it. You may cry for the years you lost, the trust that was broken, the innocence that was stolen. And that grief is holy. It is part of the clearing. It prepares the ground for something new to grow. Forgiveness, in its truest form, is not a favor to the other person. It's a deep act of self-love. It says, "I deserve peace more than I deserve to keep this anger." It recognizes that what was done may never be undone. But the suffering that lives in you because of it can be. You stop replaying the same conversations in your mind. You stop scripting confrontations that never come. You stop needing closure from someone who cannot offer it. And slowly, something softens. You begin to feel a spaciousness where there was once only pain. You begin to breathe again. Sometimes the person you need to forgive is someone else. Sometimes it's yourself. For the choices you made in survival. For the boundaries you didn't set. For the times you didn't know better. But as you heal, you understand. You did the best you could with what you knew. And you deserve compassion for that. You begin to offer yourself the same grace you longed for from others. You stop punishing yourself for not healing faster. You allow yourself to be human, wounded, flawed, growing. And that self-forgiveness becomes the gateway to deeper freedom. To forgive is not to forget. It is not to invite the wound back in. It is to close the chapter with reverence and walk forward, lighter, wiser, whole. This is not weakness. This is strength. This is not giving up. This is choosing yourself. And when you can release the weight of resentment, not because they deserve it, but because you do, that is the unmistakable sign that you are finally healing. There is a sacred, almost imperceptible shift that takes place when you begin to truly love yourself. Not in theory, not in fleeting moments, but in the quiet, consistent ways that transform your entire existence. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or declarations. It unfolds slowly, like the rising sun, warming the parts of you that had long lived in shadow. In the past, you may have mistaken self-love for indulgence or ego. Perhaps you thought it was a luxury reserved for others, those who were already confident, already healed, already whole. Or maybe you believed that love had to be earned, That you had to prove yourself, fix yourself, perfect yourself first. You searched for love in others' eyes, waited for approval, molded yourself to be chosen, not realizing that each compromise was an act of self-abandonment. But healing opens your eyes. It calls you inward, and you begin to see that the love you were chasing was never out there. It was always yours to give. Always yours to remember. Carl Jung spoke often of individuation, the path toward becoming your true self. And at the core of that journey is love, not romantic love. Not love as validation, but love as integration. The radical acceptance of all that you are, including what once felt unlovable. Your fears, your flaws, your past, your pain. Healing allows you to hold these parts with tenderness instead of shame. You stop speaking to yourself in cruel, dismissive tones. You become mindful of your inner dialogue. When the voice of the inner critic rises, you meet it not with punishment but with presence. You begin to say things like, "I see you," and "you are safe," and "you don't have to be perfect to be worthy." And slowly the war within begins to quiet. You start making decisions that honor your well-being. You rest without guilt. You nourish your body not as a project to fix, but as a vessel to cherish. You remove yourself from spaces that drain you. You set boundaries not to push people away, but to protect your energy. You stop shrinking to fit into places that were never meant for the fullness of your being. You also begin to show up for your dreams. You no longer delay your desires until someone else gives you permission. You take up space. You speak your truth. You follow your curiosity, your creativity, your joy, not because you expect praise, but because it feels like home. You stop waiting for someone to rescue you, and instead become the one who saves yourself, over and over again. This love is not dependent on your achievements, your productivity, or how much others need you. It is not love as performance. It is love as essence. Love as your natural state, before the world taught you to doubt it. And perhaps most beautifully, when you begin to love yourself in these quiet, unwavering ways, everything else changes. You no longer accept crumbs from people who can't meet you. You no longer chase what you now know you can give yourself. You attract connections that are rooted in mutual respect, not wounded attachment. You bring a fuller self to the world, not in arrogance, but in authenticity. This is what healing looks like. Not a sudden revelation, but 1,000 small acts of self-honoring. Not perfection, but presence. Not arriving, but returning, again and again, to the truth that you are already enough. To love yourself in ways you never did is to come home to yourself after a long exile. It is to look in the mirror and no longer search for what's missing, but to finally see what's been there all along. It is to realize I am not broken. I am becoming, and that is the deepest sign. You are finally truly healing. To heal is not to return to who you were. It is to rise as someone stronger, wiser, softer, and more whole. You are not broken. You are becoming. Keynote 5e healing is not becoming a new person. It is reclaiming the person you were before the world told you who to be. So if any of these signs live in your soul today, know this: you are not behind. You are not lost. You are healing. And that, my friends, is a sacred and courageous act. Keep going.